Today is the 14th day of Elul, the 17th of September. We're up to chapter 20 of Shorish Mitzvah Tefillah and Derech Mitzvah Secha. So we said that today we're going to really start the what we gain from the multiplicity in nature. So, to begin our discussion, he's going to quote from a passage of Talmud in Maseches Chagiga in the second chapter. And from that, we're going to start our discussion. So in order to understand the topic of multiplicity of creations, which is because of the many permutations. This is how we've been translating this word tziruf so far. Because tziruf also means permutation. But if you would ask somebody who speaks Hebrew, what does tziruf means? The last meaning they'd come up with is permutation. The reason we know it is because there's a book called Mayan Chochmah, the Wellspring of Wisdom, which is quoted by Reb Moses Cordovero in his Pardes. And it's a book that they say is attributed to Moses. There's all kinds of reasons why they say that, but in any case, I don't think Moses actually wrote it. He may have started the wisdom, but it wasn't something that was written down. And if you would ask a regular Hebrew speaker, what does tziruf mean? He'd say a combination. He wouldn't say permutation. And he'd say you combine two things together, that means you're mitzaref them. Another meaning that he might come up with is tzirufut, which means metallurgy. Because metallurgists, what they do is they combine and take away alloys and to make things stronger. But in any case, it's combinations. So really, even in English, that's the word that we would use if you would say it more professionally, I think. You would say combinatorics. And permutations are one of the branches of combinatorics, one of the things that combinatorics uses. So in order to understand this thing of these combinations, these permutations, so we have to first of all introduce this saying from the sages in the second chapter of Chagiga. I think it's folio 13. Katuv echad omer, one verse from Daniel says, Elef alafim yeshamshunei, v'ribo rivavon kadmohei yekumun. What is he talking about? Daniel in chapter 7 has a vision. He has a dream. And in his dream he sees a vision. He sees the four beasts. Very famous chapter in Tanakh. And the first beast is a lion with wings. The second one is a bear. The third one is a leopard. The fourth one is terrible. He doesn't say it's an animal. It's like something really terrible. It has 10 horns. And then this new horn suddenly sees sprouting out, and it destroys 3 horns in order to find space on the head. And then it has eyes like a human being, and it has a mouth, and it's speaking with terrible arrogance. And there's been a lot of explanations of what this dream is about. Finally, in the end, these 4 beasts are killed, and in their place comes the famous words that we use in Kabbalah all the time, Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, or the one who's removed from time. That's another translation of Atik Yomin. And he shows up on his throne, and he judges, he brings out the books, and he judges everything, and then finally he appoints at first it says like one person, but then in the rest of the chapter everything is about a whole group of holy people to rule the world. When this throne shows up and the Ancient of Days is sitting on it, so it says that there are 1,000 thousands serving him, and 10,000 10,000s standing before him. So what does that sound like? That sounds like a very big number, but it's a finite number. So that's the first verse that the Gemara brings, that the Talmud brings. Then brings another verse from Job, where it says, Katuv echad omer, hayesh mispar ligdudav. Job asks, can there be a number to his cohorts, to his troops? I think they translate usually as troops. So, what do you do with these two? Because when you say, can there be a number, you're saying it's infinite. Meaning there's no number to it. So which is it? So is it a very large number, or is it a finite, but finite, or is it an endless number of troops that he has? So Tanya Rebbe Omer Mishum Abba Yosei ben Dosai. So Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah, says in the name of Abba Yossi ben Dosai. Really, this is the interpretation. When it says Elef Alafim Mishum Shunei Mispar Gdud Echad, it says in one troop there are 1,000 thousands, meaning there's 1,000,000. Veligduda ven mispar, but the troops are endless. What does it matter if you go there? Meaning he says you have to, they don't contradict, they work together. So you have an endless number of troops, but in each troop there's a finite number of elements.
There's many troops.
Right. Not just many troops, an endless number
of
troops, but a finite number of servants in each troop.
Yeah.
Okay. Peresh Rashi explained this there on the page. 1,000 alafim hu mispar shel kol gdud vegdud. He said everything, 1,000 thousands, 1,000,000 is the number within each troop. Aval ein mispar kama gdudim, but there's no number of troops; they're endless, like we just said. Okay, seemingly, what did we gain from this? So there's a lot to gain from this. Actually, a whole mimer that the Rebbe does on. Includes this in his mimer, in his essay on this. And it has to do with the questions that we've already asked. Are there levels of infinity? Can there be finite numbers of infinity? Are there infinite numbers of infinity? They're all questions that are very important, but he's going to do something a little bit different with it. והעניין דיני פירוש גדוד היינו המקור של יניקת וחיות Kat umachane echad mimalachim. So he says, first of all, we have to understand what is a troop. A troop, he says, is like the root from which a group of angels and a camp of angels receives its life force. A troop is like the root from which the angels receive their life force. So every group of angels has its own root. כי כמו שישראל נתחלקו לארבעה דגלים, ובכל דגל כמה שבטים, כמו כן המלאכים בתיקון דלילה הם 4 תיקוני דשכינתא. So it's just as we know that when the Jewish people were in the wilderness, they were divided into 4 camps. Each camp had 3 tribes. Why were they divided this way? Because he says the same way that we were divided this way, the angels are divided this way. They're also divided into 4 encampments, 4 camps. So each camp has its own root from which it receives its life force. And they're called the 4 camps of the divine presence, of the Shekhinah. How does it work? Degel machane Michael, v'aledo kama machanot. So there's the banner of the camp of Michael is the archangel, and by him there are a number of sub-camps, smaller camps. So Michael, he's the right side, he's the love, he's the loving kindness. And the same thing is for the left side, where we find the camp of Gabriel. And the source of their life force, where they receive their, in the same way that we need to eat, they also eat something. They have some kind of energy that they receive. This is called the 12 diagonal borders. This is a concept from the book of Yetzirah, the book of formation, from Sefer Yetzirah. If you ask someone who's even learned the book of formation in depth, they won't know what this is. There's so many different opinions. It's very hard to define what these 12 diagonal borders are. There's all kinds of theories. From that it's connected to the name of 72 triplets that we saw, to the fact that it's connected to a cube. There's all kinds of theories about what this is. He's going to define it in a completely new way that I don't think existed before Chassidus. This was a whole new way of understanding it. And it was focusing on the word alachson. Alachson literally today means diagonal. It probably meant diagonal also then. It's not from Hebrew. The word isn't a Hebrew word, it's a Greek word. I don't remember what the original Greek is. Now, I believe that in Greek it actually meant angle and not a diagonal. I think. I have to check it again. What is this word then? So he says, V'inei inyan alachson hu b'chinat ha'or shena'asa mimizigat hamidot v'itkallelutan ze im ze. So he gives a very interesting explanation of what this alachson, this diagonal or angle is. How would we define an angle? We would say that it's where two segments meet, two lines meet. So they form an angle. If they're not parallel, they have to form an angle at some point. So, if they're on the same plane. So, he says though that this diagonal is actually the light that comes out of the inter-inclusion, or the bringing together, combining two aspects, two measures. By measures we always mean the 6 measures of the heart, from loving kindness to foundation. Now you can understand why there's 12. Why? Because there's only 12 combinations that create what is called an alachson, this diagonal or angle. So, if you take loving kindness and might, and you combine them, then you get one of these alachsonim, you get one of these angles. So either they're coming at an angle to one another, or the way a lot of times this was understood was that somehow this has to do with the cube, where faces of the cube meet. There are all kinds of different theories about this, but where they combine, that's called an alachson. What do we gain from this? What is this now? He says, Ki yadua dechokma chesed netzach hu bekav hayamin, ubina gvura hod bekav hasmol, ve'amshecha mibchinat chokma lehod nikra alachson. Because it's known that the sfirot are divided on 3 axes. They're aligned along 3 axes, the right, middle, and left. So when you take one from the right and one from the left, which do not combine because they're running parallel to one another, and you do combine them, that creates what's called a diagonal. This is like a geometry class. But obviously, geometry, especially in the Middle Ages and early modernity, even today you'll find some people doing this. It wasn't meant to be understood literally. It was meant to be used as a metaphor. So the question is, what is this a metaphor for? So what he's saying is, if you take 2 diametrically opposite measures or faculties, here you have something from the left and something from the right, and you are able to somehow combine them, that combination indicates that this is a state of rectification. This is a state that can beget life. It can give birth to something. So, based on this explanation, we'll get a little bit more into it in a moment, but based on this explanation, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, he analyzed this word alachson, which again is a Greek word. And so you can play with it however you want in Hebrew, because it's like a Hebrew pronunciation, transliteration of a Greek word. And he used to read it as sakal ain. The letters inside are samech, kaf, and lamed. So in the alachson they're actually written as lamed, kaf, samech, but he switched them around and said sakal. Sakal means a number of things, but it can also mean to gaze at, to look at. And the first letter and the last 2 letters in alachson are aleph, vav, nun, and he read it as ain. Ayin means nothingness. So he says it means looking at the nothingness. It's a gazing at nothingness. What does that mean? It means exactly what we think it means. It means being able to attain or comprehend nullification. I'm gazing at nothingness. I'm able to nullify. If you can nullify, that is a sign of rectification. That's exactly what the difference between the world of chaos and the world of rectification is, that in the world of chaos there was no self-nullification, there was no ability to nullify. Everybody was the king, and nobody wanted to cooperate with anyone else, and certainly not to combine with anyone else. But the ability to combine with someone else and to do that, you have to have self-nullification. Like anybody who's married knows, you have to have self-nullification. That can give birth to something new. And so these alachsonim, these diagonals or angles, are really what they want to indicate is not something geometric. They want to indicate a state of two things coming together out of self-nullification, and because of that, they're able to beget something new. And that's what these 12 alachsonim are. Now we understand what we meant when we said that the angels, that these troops, these camps of angels, they take their life force from these 12 diagonals. Meaning that they are born and bred and sustained through the constant combination that happens between two different measures out of the sfirot, out of the different sfirot. And another example of this is, I skipped a parenthesis, we'll explain it now. When you look at these 12 diagonals, later on, they're called diagonals in the world of emanation. In the world of creation, they will be called the 12 oxen. What's the 12 oxen? When Solomon built the temple, he also built a big pool made out of bronze. And he put the pool on 12 oxen made of bronze, and 3 on each side, so you had altogether 12, 3 times 4. And these are the 12 diagonals in the lower world. Why? What's the connection? Because an ox in Hebrew is also a par, and par means to multiply, lifrot velirbot, to be fruitful and multiply. So the ox was always a sign of something that was very fruitful, that was very able to fertile, something that was very fertile. So they're like the sources there. And again, there's many images of 12 things in the world. The next one after that, in the world of formation, is usually the 12 months of the year. And then lower on, you also have in the world of in the world of action, there's also different 12s that indicate this. Usually in the world of action, we talk about the tribes. In any case, there's many 12s. They all mean the same thing. When you say a tribe, it's probably even from the same word, the same thing as troop. Some kind of something that begets as a starting point for things to be fertile and to multiply. So this is the source, this is the root of all the angels. Each angel has its own root, has its own diagonal. והוא עניין הערה חדשה שנעשה ממזיגה חדשה על ידי התקלות הספירות זו עם זו, מקו הימין לקו שמאל ומקו שמאל לקו הימין. וזהו עניין י"ב גבולי האלכסון, שכל בחינת האלכסון הוא עניין האור הנעשה ממזיגת והתקללות המידות, והוא מקור השפע וחיות של מחנה מלאכים דבריאה, והוא הנקרא גדוד. So a troop literally means this source of life, of sustenance that comes, most importantly, because there's a combination of two things that normally could not connect. And the fact that they're connecting, the fact that they're coming together, that is a sign, or not a sign, but, well, it is a sign that they're rectified, and it also means that they will be able to give birth, they will be fertile, they will be able to sustain things underneath them, and that's what a troop is. So far what we have is a definition of what a troop is. And so, like we said in the Talmud, it says there's endless numbers of troops, even though here it sounds like there's only 12. We'll see why later. And the angels that come out of each one are infinite in number. So they can be there's an endless number of troops, but there's a finite number of angels that can come out of each one of these troops. So they continue. So this was a little technical. Main thing to get out of this is, in terms of the psyche, is that in order for there to be life, you have to have opposites connecting. You can't have a male and a male. It doesn't do anything. You have to have a male and a female. And it's because they're opposite. It's because they don't get along. It's because they need self-nullification to be able to combine together. Okay, so that's in here.